Welcome to the Effective Communication course, brought to you by the Minnesota Soybean Growers Association, Project Grow. Let's get started. In today's course, we'll talk about why effective communication. We'll then define what effective communication really is, and then we'll break it down even further and talk about the elements of effective communication. To set some purpose for this course, let's answer the question, why is effective communication so important? Well, we communicate with those around us every day. May it be in our personal lives or in our professional lives. We want what we have to say and what others hear and interpret to be consistent. What is the impact of poor communication? The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. This is a great quote by George Bernard Shaw. Why is this the single biggest problem? Because we think if we have communicated something in our personal style, those who receive it will certainly understand it. This mindset leads to lots of misinterpretations. When there's poor communication, you also lose trust in one another. That leads to having poor relationships, and when all of the above are happening, it takes a lot longer to accomplish the tasks you need to get done on a daily basis on the job. As we come to the end of the first section of our module, let's just focus on one important point, and that is that we are all different. We're different in how we perceive the world and how we perceive a message. It's important to keep this in mind because how we walk through the world, the lenses that we wear, impact the way that we communicate with others and the way we receive messages. Next, let's define effective communication. If we were to look at a very simple definition of effective communication, it would be being able to communicate a message without the possibility of being misunderstood. Effective communication is really key to maintaining strong relationships both in your home and work life. Effective communication impacts how you have conversations with your family, your friends, and the people you work with every day. It's important to remember that effective communication is a two-way exchange. It's a two-way street. And finally, when effective communication is happening across the people you spend your time with, you tend to have more clarity, which is so important to getting the things done that you need to do on a daily basis. Let's move into the final portion of this course and talk about the elements of effective communication. We're going to dive in deeper and talk about the specific elements that make up effective communication. These include the sender, receiver, message, method, and feedback. We're going to focus on the first four and then spend some additional time on feedback at the end. Let's get started. First is sender. The sender is the person who kicks off the communication. They're the ones that are going to be sending the initial message. The sender is responsible for what we call encoding the message. That means basically taking the message that they have in their head and putting it into words or written form, etc. An example of a sender could be an equipment dealer making a presentation to you about a new piece of equipment, a parent lecturing a child, or a customer who writes a complaint letter after a bad experience. Next is the receiver. This is the person who the message is directed at. How a receiver receives the message is impacted by a number of factors. They could be impacted by the knowledge of the individual regarding the message, how open they are to receiving the message, environmental factors, and more. An example of a receiver could be one of your coworkers as you explain instructions about a new piece of machinery, or it could be that company receiving your letter about that bad experience. The receiver in this example would be the person reviewing the letter that you had submitted. Next is the message. This is the what or the meat that you're sharing with the receiver. A message can be verbal or nonverbal. It could be oral, meaning spoken, it could be written, or it could be visual. Example messages could be handwritten instructions that you left for someone you work with, a story that you share at a bank meeting about something that happened to you the other day. The possibilities are endless. Method is next. Method can also be known as the channel. This is basically how you choose to package your message. The method is typically either verbal or written. Now that we've discussed the first four elements of effective communication, let's spend a little bit of time of defining feedback. Feedback is such an important part to the communication process. The sender and the receiver are the active roles in the feedback step. Feedback is about a two-way dialogue, both the sender and the receiver giving each other feedback throughout the communication process. Feedback requires listening, and listening is an active skill, one that both the sender and the receiver need to practice. Feedback can be as simple as rolling eyes, or a smile, or a head nod, or verbally responding to a question or a thought. The two-way dialogue of feedback allows effective communication to take place and ensure that the communication keeps rolling. Feedback is really the only way that we can confirm that the receiver has understood your message correctly. Feedback helps us ensure there is clarity. Feedback is such an important part to the effective communication process. We've now come to the end of our effective communication module. Thanks for paying attention. We covered why effective communication. We defined effective communication, and then finally we talked about the specific elements that make up effective communication. Thank you for your time and your attention. This concludes the Effective Communication course brought to you by the Minnesota Soybean Growers Association, Project Grow.